All right, so today I wanted to talk about another Thomas Sowell quote. Now, I mean, let's read it and then I'll get into it. He says, "It is amazing how many people think that they can answer an argument by attributing bad motives to those who disagree with them. Using this kind of reasoning, you can believe or not anything about anything without having to bother to deal with facts or logic." Now, another way of putting this is basically debating with leftists 101 right here, and not everything, because I think there's some things that the left is right about, but some good examples of this would be number one would be healthcare, debating the left with on healthcare, on taxation, on gun control is another big one too, and that the left somehow thinks, and it works in their circles. Like the way people debate, it's usually just a confession of their own. It's usually just projecting their own worldview and projecting their own ignorance. Because the one thing that I really notice with people these days is whenever you debate with them, again, it's usually just a confession of their own ignorance. Because if they're not fully aware of what the other side believes and why they believe it, then they're confessing to you that they're ignorant and they're not interested in a rational, cordial conversation right out the gate. Right? Like, this is the thing that why this kind of stuff so easy to talk about and debate people on, is that whenever you bring these kind of topics up, you can tell within the first time someone responds whether or not it's going to go anywhere, and not only that, you can tell how much they know. Because the thing is that most people nowadays, they, especially on the left, because leftists are more likely to be in echo chambers, but they're completely oblivious to what the other side believes and why they believe it. And like I said, you can immediately tell, like within the first time they'll respond, whether or not they actually have any idea what they're talking about. Because when it comes to gun control, um, if they don't immediately respond with under an the way they respond, I think would be a better way of saying it, is that if the way they respond isn't, um, you know, articulating or showing an understanding for what the other side believes and why they believe it, then it's not going to go anywhere. And getting into this whole bad motives thing, um, like I said, whenever someone tries to use this tactic, it's almost always a confession of not being able to be able to debate the actual important stuff, like the meat of the argument, right? I mean, this is another thing too, that what does the left always say on immigration? What do they say on this kind of stuff? Oh, it's you're racist, right? It's not that you recognize the basic fact that we don't even have enough money to pay for the existing population, let alone another 500,000 people a year. That 75, 80% of them are going to be people who take more out of the system than they put in. It's not that. It's not that, these people don't have, most of them at least, some of them do, but the majority of them don't have similar values to the average Canadian, right? I mean, there's many, 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 many other issues to immigration, but again, whenever it comes to immigration, it's never that stuff, right? It's always, oh, you're a racist, right? And the reality is that the reason they don't want to, they just call you a racist, is that they don't have an argument for those arguments, right? They don't have one, right? And again, whenever you point out those basic facts too, they'll deny them too. They'll deny that immigrants from the third world, are more likely to be on welfare, that they're more likely to commit crimes. But then, like I say, they'll vehemently deny that. But then, if you actually, want them to put their money where their mouth is, they'll never do it, right? The same thing goes for gun control too. Is that these people, like, again, like the ignorance of these people, like it really knows no bounds. And that on one hand, they think that by banning guns, it somehow makes crime go down. But banning, alcohol or marijuana or things like that, oh, that doesn't work, right? Like how do you square that away in your mind? Like, your argument on one hand is, oh, prohibition absolutely works, but on the other hand, prohibition absolutely doesn't work. Like, how insane can you possibly be to believe this stuff, right? Like, again, like, it's a perfect example. Like, give these people, like, how many high school kids have trouble getting alcohol, right? No, none of them do. Like if a high school, if they want to have a high school party, they find some way to get alcohol, right? It's the same thing goes for guns too. If criminals want guns, they're gonna get it. We have an uncontrolled border with the country with the most guns in the world. Like, I mean, getting a gun is so easy in Canada, it's not even funny, right? I mean, not as easy as the States maybe, but it's still very easy. So again, and what they do when it comes to gun control is, oh, you're fine with these people dying, right? Well, no, it's not that we're fine with people dying. That has nothing to do with it. It's that we recognize that by increasing restrictions on guns, you're not actually going to fix the problem that they claim to be fixing, right? Same thing. Let's talk about healthcare. Well, what is the argument on healthcare? Is, oh, you don't want to give people free healthcare because you want them to die, or you're okay with them dying. Well, no, it has nothing to do with that, right? It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that we don't have the money to give it away for quote unquote free, right? And people wonder, oh, how do we make it do of it in Canada? Well, we make do of it um, by putting people on waiting lists, right? Like if you want to get an MRI, you're waiting 6 months to a year, right? If you want to get a surgery, unless it's a immediate, you need the surgery or you're gonna literally gonna die, yeah, you're gonna be waiting a year, maybe two, right? Like that's how we do it, right? So it's not healthcare, right? It's not healthcare. Healthcare is, I have a problem, I need it done, and I want it done now, right? If you have a problem, you should be able to get it done, but we can't because we wouldn't be able to afford it, right? We wouldn't be able to afford it. So again, like, do people think that access to a waiting list is somehow healthcare? No, it really isn't. Um, but again, how do they make do with their worldview? Well, it's, oh, well, you don't want to give poor people health care, so you want them dead. Well, no, it has nothing to do with that. It is, I mean, if you want to entertain that argument, well, number one, um, the reality of healthcare in Canada, I mean, for example, is that, again, Canada is the only country in the world that doesn't have or at the very least, the only OECD country that doesn't have a private option, right? So people think that the States is an outlier. They really aren't, right? Like, Canada is more of an outlier than the States. The States has, I think it's like $600 billion a year spent on Medicare and Medicaid, right? So the idea that people think that the States is this completely free market system, it really isn't. The States is actually an example of a country that has a good balance between private and public, right? Or at the very least, somewhat, right? Because I think about half of every dollar spent on healthcare in the States is government or subsidized, right? So I think it's pretty safe to say that a country that has half of every dollar spent on healthcare be public versus private, that's the definition of balance, right? But again, Canada, we don't have that, right? We don't have that. Um, and the thing when it comes to healthcare too is that the majority of health ailments, I think the number is like 2/3 or 70%, are lifestyle related. So again, if poor people didn't have the option to force other people to pay for their health care at the point of a gun, they would simply just make better choices, right? They would simply make better choices. And here's the other thing too, is that if we massively deregulated the system, poor people, I mean, someone working a minimum wage job who is healthy could afford health insurance, right? Because if you look at health insurance in the States before all the BS rules and regulations were, this is the biggest problem with healthcare in the States. It's not the private part. It's there's way too many rules and regulations, right? Um, if you look back, like, a couple generations ago, you could get health insurance for the equivalent of like 1 or 2 days' wages. Like, imagine if you could get good health insurance coverage for like two, three, $400. Like, I don't know what exactly the median daily earnings in Canada would be, but even if it's $500 a year, that's not that much money, right? That's not that much money for healthcare. And here's the other thing that people don't realize is that in Alberta, at least, the province spends about $5,000 per person on healthcare, and that's per person. That's not even per taxpayer, right? So the idea that the average person wouldn't save money on a private system is it's absolute insanity. Now, the real reason that the left, or at the very least, it's usually the left, that they love the whole public sector healthcare thing is that it's money in the hands of leftists, right? Because who runs the unions, right? Who runs the unions, right? Who runs these big public sector, things, it's leftist, right? If we switch to a private system, well, who would run it? It would be capitalists, right? So again, it's entirely a political thing. It has nothing to do with saving lives or any of this BS they like telling you about. That's just the cover for the real reason. And again, it's simply a political thing. And here's the thing: they would say, "Oh, you're attributing negative motives." No, I'm not. It's saying it's political. It's not attributing negative motive or negative bad motives, right? It really isn't, because it's simply people wanting to do what's best for what they believe politically. That's not attributing bad motives. So yeah, this is, like I say, it's basically debating leftists 101, because most of these issues they have no debate on, like capitalism versus socialism, right? That socialism doesn't help the poor; it just hurts the middle class. When you have a socialist country, a truly socialist country, all it does is just hollow out the middle class, because it creates no incentive to be in the middle class, because those are the people that get screwed over the worst. And here's the other thing too, that people think, oh, is there very rich people in socialist countries? Absolutely, there still is, because they find out ways around the rules, because they're, number one, there has to be people that set the rules, and the people that set the rules always usually they usually just exempt themselves or find out other ways around it. I mean, you look at was it Chavez, or I mean, look at these families in these socialist and communist countries. They're filthy rich, right? They're filthy rich. So again, the reality is when it comes to socialism, is that, like I say, it just hollows out the middle class, because it creates no incentive to be there. Right? It creates no incentive to be there, and the goal of these socialist systems, it's more of a hatred for the rich rather than a love for the poor, right? So because the motivation is completely backwards, right? The motivation isn't to help the poor; it's to take from the rich. You never actually end up helping the poor, because the motivations are completely backwards. The motivations are completely backwards. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. I think it was a very good topic to talk about. So obviously I wanted to talk about it. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you check out those links in the description. Follow me on those other platforms. Donate if you can do that. Again, appreciate whatever support I can get. And like I say, hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more.